The night my mother died, I thought the worst pain had already come and gone. I didn't know that real pain was still waiting for me, under the same roof, from someone I trusted the most. What happened next changed everything I believed about love, family, and survival. Blood. Warm, sticky, and real. It ran down my leg and dripped onto the cold floor as my grandfather's shadow loomed over me. My body trembled, my heart screamed, but no sound came out. I wanted to shout, to fight, to escape, but my voice was gone. The same man who once carried me on his shoulders when I was a little girl now stood above me, his face filled with anger and shame. The day my mother died should have been the worst day of my life, but it wasn't. What he did to me that night made me wish I had died with her. I remember staring at the wall, whispering in my heart, "One day, I will make a decision that will change everything." That was the night everything inside me broke. The night I lost my mother, my safety, and my childhood all at once. But before that night came, my life was different. Full of laughter, full of light, full of a mother's love that made every day feel warm and safe. My name is Lily, and before everything went dark, I was just a 12-year-old girl who loved baking cookies with my mom, listening to her sing old songs while the evening sun painted the walls gold. My mother, Caroline, was gentle, with soft brown hair that smelled like jasmine. She'd always say, "Lily, no matter what happens in life, keep kindness in your heart." I didn't know that the last time she said those words, they would be the last thing I'd ever hear from her. It was a rainy morning when it happened. The sky was gray, and thunder rolled like angry drums. My mother had gone to the market, promising to bring me a red ribbon for my hair. But hours passed and she didn't come back. My little heart waited at the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Then around sunset, I saw two men in black suits walking up to our door. One of them held his hat in his hands. My grandfather followed behind them. His face looked pale and old, older than I had ever seen. "Lily," he said softly, his voice shaking. "Come here, child." I remember running into his arms, but he didn't hug me back. He just stood there, stiff, as tears fell from his eyes. "Your mother," he whispered, "she didn't make it. There was an accident." The world stopped spinning. My legs went weak. My ears rang. I couldn't breathe. My mother, my best friend, was gone. I screamed until my voice broke. Days turned into nights, and I cried until my pillow was always wet. Everyone came to the funeral, everyone except my father. I never knew him. My mother said he left before I was even born. So it was just me and Grandpa now. He moved into our house to take care of me, or so he said. At first, I thought it would be okay. Grandpa used to bring me candies when he visited. He told me bedtime stories and called me his little sunshine. But after my mother died, something changed in him. His eyes were darker. He drank more. Sometimes he talked to himself. At night, I would hear him pacing in the living room muttering, "She ruined everything. Caroline ruined everything." I didn't understand what he meant, but it scared me. One night, about 2 weeks after the funeral, I was in bed when I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow. Heavy. My heart started racing. I quickly closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, but the door creaked open, and his breath smelled of alcohol. He sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "You look just like your mother." I opened my eyes in fear. "Grandpa?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His hand touched my hair gently, then moved to my shoulder. I froze. "Stop, Grandpa, please," I said, but my voice was weak. He didn't stop. That was the night everything I knew shattered. The pain, the fear, the silence, it all burned inside me. I didn't tell anyone because who would believe a little girl? Who would believe that a man everyone called a good church elder could do something so terrible? The next morning, I couldn't look at him. I stayed in my room, hugging my teddy bear. When he came to give me breakfast, I didn't eat. He tried to smile and said, "Don't be angry, Lily. You'll understand when you're older." Understand what? That pain was love. That silence was safety. I didn't want to understand. I wanted my mother back. As days passed, he became meaner. Sometimes he would yell at me for no reason, telling me I looked like my mother and that she had cursed his life. Other times, he would act normal, even kind, and that was the most confusing part. How could the same person hurt me and then smile at me like nothing happened? But inside, I was changing too. Something cold started growing in me. I stopped crying. I stopped talking. And one night, as I stared at the ceiling, I made a quiet promise to myself. One day, I will make a decision. A big one. A decision that will end all of this. I didn't know what it would be, but I felt it deep in my bones. Something would happen soon. And it did. It started the day he came home drunk again. I was washing dishes when he slammed the door so hard that the glasses on the shelf shook. His face was red, his eyes wild. "You think you're better than me, huh?" he shouted. "You think you can ignore me?" I stepped back scared. "No, Grandpa, I didn't." He slapped me so hard my vision went blurry. I fell to the ground, my cheek burning. He grabbed my wrist and dragged me to the living room. "You're just like her," he screamed. "She ruined me, and now you will too." That was the moment I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. He raised his hand again, but before it came down, something inside me snapped. I picked up the broken glass from the floor and held it tight in my hand, my eyes full of tears and fire. "Don't touch me again," I whispered. He froze. For the first time, he looked afraid. Blood dripped from my hand, mixing with my tears. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the little girl he could hurt. And that was the night I made my first big decision. The glass shard trembled in my hand as I faced him. My blood dripped onto the carpet, bright red against the faded brown rug my mother had loved. My grandfather's eyes flickered from my face to the glass, and for the first time, I saw something new in him, fear. It was small, but it was there. "Put that down, Lily," he said, his voice low and shaky. "You don't know what you're doing." But I did. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I did know what I was doing. I was fighting back. My hand trembled, not from weakness, but from rage and pain that had been building inside me since the day my mother died. "Don't come near me again," I said, my voice trembling but strong. He stepped back, breathing hard. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I fell to the floor, shaking. That night I didn't sleep. My hand throbbed, and my heart hurt even more. I cleaned the cut quietly, wrapping it with an old towel. My mother's picture sat on the shelf beside my bed. I looked at her smile, gentle, loving, full of warmth, and I whispered, "Mom, what do I do now?" The next morning, I made up my mind. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. My decision had to be more than just standing up for myself. It had to be an escape. I packed a few clothes into a small bag, along with my mother's old necklace. A silver locket shaped like a heart. Inside was a photo of us together when I was little. I held it tight against my chest and promised myself I would survive, no matter what. When I crept downstairs, I saw my grandfather passed out on the sofa, empty bottles around him. His snores filled the room, heavy and uneven. For a moment, I just stood there looking at him. This was the man who used to tell me bedtime stories, who once called me his sunshine. Now he was the darkness that haunted my every dream. I slipped out the front door and ran. The morning air was cold, biting against my skin. The road stretched ahead, wet from last night's rain. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. My small legs carried me down the road, through fields and narrow paths, until I reached the small town nearby. People looked at me strangely, a barefoot girl with a bag and a tear-stained face, but no one stopped me. I went to the park where my mother used to take me, sitting on the same old bench under the big oak tree. That's where Mrs. Jenkins found me. She was an old lady with kind eyes and gray hair tied in a bun. She sold bread at the market and used to give me little buns when I came with my mom. "Lily," she said softly, her voice full of concern. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here alone?" The moment I saw her, all my courage broke. I burst into tears. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight, like a mother would. "Shoo, it's okay, darling. You're safe now," she whispered. She took me to her small bakery, which smelled of warm bread and sugar. I hadn't eaten since the night before, so she gave me a soft roll with butter. I ate quietly, afraid to speak. When she asked about my grandfather, I froze. "Did something happen, dear?" she asked gently. I wanted to tell her everything. The pain, the fear, the nights I cried myself to sleep. But the words wouldn't come. I was scared. What if she didn't believe me? What if she sent me back? So I just said, I don't want to go home. Mrs. Jenkins frowned but didn't push me. All right, sweetheart, she said. You can stay here for a bit. We'll figure something out. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. I helped her sweep the floor, wash dishes, and pack bread for customers. She smiled and said, You're a good helper, Lily. You remind me of my daughter. That night, she let me sleep in the small guest room beside the bakery. The bed was soft, and I could smell the sweet scent of dough from the kitchen. I held my mother's locket close and whispered, I'm safe now, Mom. I think I'm safe. But safety didn't last. The next morning, when I went to the front of the shop to help, I saw a tall man talking to Mrs. Jenkins. My stomach dropped. It was my grandfather. He looked furious, his eyes burning, his clothes wrinkled. Where is she? He demanded. My granddaughter, she ran away. She's just a child. Mrs. Jenkins looked at me and then back at him. She's here, she said calmly. But she told me she doesn't want to go back with you. She's lying, he shouted. She's confused. Her mother just died. She's not thinking straight. Tears filled my eyes. I'm not lying. I cried. Please don't make me go with him. Mrs. Jenkins stepped in front of me. Sir, I think you should leave, she said firmly. He glared at her. You don't know what you're doing, old woman. She's mine. Before he could take another step, Mrs. Jenkins picked up the phone and said, I'll call the police if you don't leave right now. The room went silent. His face turned red, but he backed away slowly. He pointed a finger at me and said in a low voice, You can run, Lily, but you can't hide forever. Then he walked out, slamming the door. I burst into tears, shaking from head to toe. Mrs. Jenkins hugged me tightly. Don't you worry, dear. He won't hurt you again. I'll make sure of that. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his words. You can't hide forever. I knew he meant them. I didn't sleep at all. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak felt like footsteps. My heart beat fast, and my hand reached for the locket around my neck. I whispered to my mother again, Please protect me. Then sometime after midnight, I heard a noise outside, slow, careful footsteps near the window. I held my breath, afraid to move. And then the window handle started to turn. The sound of the window handle turning froze my heart. I sat up in bed, my hands clutching the blanket, too afraid to breathe. The faint moonlight coming through the curtain showed the shadow of a hand. Slow and careful, trying to lift the latch. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream for Mrs. Jenkins, but no sound came out. My heart thudded so loud I thought whoever was outside would hear it. Then the window creaked open. A cold wind rushed in, making the curtain sway. I saw the outline of a man, tall, broad, and moving quietly like he didn't want to be caught. The smell hit me next, that strong mix of alcohol and tobacco that I would never forget. My blood went cold. It was him, Grandpa. He climbed halfway in through the window, whispering, Lily, sweetheart, it's me. Don't be scared. Come home, okay? You don't belong here. My body started shaking. Go away, I whispered, backing up until my back hit the wall. Leave me alone. He kept crawling in, his voice calm but strange. Don't say that, Lily. You know Grandpa loves you. We just need to talk, that's all. Then suddenly the lights came on. Who's there? Mrs. Jenkins' voice cut through the silence like thunder. She stood at the door holding a broom, her night robe fluttering. When she saw him halfway through the window, her eyes widened. You, she shouted. Get out of my house right now or I'll call the police. Grandpa's face twisted with anger. Stay out of this, woman. He barked, trying to pull himself inside. But Mrs. Jenkins didn't back down. She ran to the table, grabbed the phone, and shouted, I'm calling them right now. He froze, his eyes darting between her and me. For a moment, it looked like he might jump in anyway. But then, hearing her actually dialing, he hissed under his breath, This isn't over, and slipped back out into the night. I burst into tears. Mrs. Jenkins ran to me, hugging me tightly. It's okay, baby. It's okay, you're safe now, she said softly. but I could hear her heart racing too. The police came soon after. They took my statement while Mrs. Jenkins held my hand. I told them everything, not just about that night, but everything that happened since my mother died. Every tear, every bruise, every terrible thing I'd been too scared to say. One of the officers, a tall man with kind eyes, looked at me with pity. "You're a brave little girl," he said. "We'll make sure he doesn't hurt you again." But when they went to his house the next morning, he was gone. He had disappeared. The police searched for days, asking neighbors, checking nearby towns, but there was no trace of him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. For a while I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his shadow at the window. Mrs. Jenkins stayed with me at night, reading me stories or humming songs to help me calm down. Slowly, I started to feel safe again. She went to the court and spoke to child services. After hearing what happened, they agreed I could stay with her until things were sorted out. That news made me cry again, but this time they were happy tears. Mrs. Jenkins became like a grandmother to me. She was gentle but strong, and every morning she would wake me with the smell of warm bread and say, "A new day, a new start, Lily." Weeks passed, and the shadows in my mind began to fade. I even started smiling again. I helped her in the bakery, selling bread to the townspeople, and playing with her cat, Muffin. Life was quiet and peaceful. But peace never lasts forever. One sunny afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins sent me to deliver a loaf of bread to her friend who lived a few streets away. I took the basket and skipped down the road, feeling light and happy for the first time in a long while. As I turned the corner near the old bridge, I saw a man standing by a tree. He wore a brown coat and hat pulled low over his face. I didn't pay attention at first, until he lifted his head. My blood ran cold. It was him. Grandpa. He smiled, not kindly, not warmly, but in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hello, Lily," he said softly. "You thought you could hide from me?" I dropped the basket, my heart thudding. "Please, please go away," I whispered. He took a slow step forward. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice smooth but cruel. "You made me look bad in front of everyone. Do you know how that feels?" Tears filled my eyes. I turned and ran, as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I could hear his footsteps behind me, his voice shouting, "Come back here, Lily." I ran across the bridge, my legs trembling. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I darted into the first alley I saw and hid behind a stack of wooden crates, holding my breath. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I waited and waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. When I finally peeked out, he was gone. But I didn't feel safe. I knew him, he wouldn't give up so easily. I ran all the way back to Mrs. Jenkins' house, burst through the door crying, "He's back! He's back!" She grabbed me by the shoulders, panic in her eyes. "Who, child?" "Grandpa. I saw him by the bridge. He tried to follow me." Mrs. Jenkins locked all the doors and called the police again, but by the time they arrived, he had disappeared again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the darkness, clutching my mother's locket. The wind howled outside and I whispered, "Mom, I don't know how much longer I can keep running." And then just before dawn I saw it. A piece of paper slipped under the door. My heart stopped. I crawled toward it and picked it up with trembling hands. It was a note, written in his rough handwriting. "If you don't come home, I'll come for you. And next time no one will stop me." The paper fell from my hand as my tears dropped onto it. Mrs. Jenkins found me sitting on the floor, shaking. She read the note, her face going pale. "We're not waiting for the police this time," she said firmly. "We're leaving." She packed our bags quickly, her hands trembling but determined. "He won't find you again, Lily. I promise." But as we stepped outside, ready to run, a dark car slowly pulled up in front of the bakery, and the man inside was smiling. The black car stopped right in front of us. Its engine hummed low, like a growling animal ready to pounce. Mrs. Jenkins froze beside me, holding my hand so tight it almost hurt. The morning air, which just moments ago had been calm, now felt heavy, thick with fear. The driver's door opened slowly. A tall man stepped out, dressed in dark clothes and wearing sunglasses even though the sun was barely out. My heart raced as he looked straight at us. For a moment, I thought it was my grandfather again, but it wasn't. This man was younger, sharper looking. Mrs. Jenkins? He said in a firm voice. I'm Officer Clark. You called about Mr. Andrews? Mrs. Jenkins blinked, confused. Yes, I did, she said cautiously. Is everything okay? He nodded. We found your father-in-law's car near the river. It seems he's been hiding in the woods for a few days. But don't worry, the officer continued, glancing at me kindly. We've got men searching for him right now. I felt my knees weaken. My chest tightened as I whispered. So? He's still out there. Officer Clark knelt. So he was eye level with me. We'll find him, Lily, he said softly. But you must stay somewhere safe until we do. Mrs. Jenkins thanked him, and he gave her a paper with an address. There's a women's shelter a few towns away. They'll take you both in for now. We'll call you as soon as we have news. As soon as he left, Mrs. Jenkins turned to me. Get your bag, sweetheart. We're leaving now. I nodded, clutching my small bag tightly. We locked the bakery door and hurried down the road. Mrs. Jenkins' old car rattled as she started it, but I didn't care how slow it was, as long as it took us far away from that place. We drove for hours. I watched the trees blur past the window, my thoughts spinning like the wheels on the road. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow outside made me think of him. When we finally arrived, it was evening. The shelter was a big white house with flowers in the garden, and a small sign that said Safe Haven for Women and Children. A kind woman named Sarah greeted us at the door. She had warm eyes and a calm smile that made me feel a little lighter. You're safe here, she said gently, kneeling to look at me. No one can hurt you in this house, I promise. I wanted to believe her. Inside, everything was quiet and clean. There were other women there too, some with children. I saw sadness in their eyes. Different stories, but the same kind of pain. Sarah showed us to a small room with 2 beds. Rest, she said softly. You've both had a long day. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Jenkins had fallen asleep quickly, but I couldn't close my eyes. The quiet scared me. It was too quiet. My mind kept replaying his voice. If you don't come home, I'll come for you. I turned and whispered. Mom, I wish you were here. Then for the first time in weeks, I started to pray. Not for him to be caught, not even for revenge, just for peace. For the fear to stop. For the memories to fade. Days passed. Slowly, I started to feel a bit normal again. I joined other kids at the shelter for small activities, drawing, reading, baking cookies. Sometimes I even laughed, though it felt strange to hear my own laughter again. Mrs. Jenkins began helping in the kitchen, and everyone loved her bread. She told them stories about her late husband and smiled more each day. Seeing her happy made me happy too. But every night, I still checked the window before sleeping. I couldn't help it. One afternoon, as I was sitting outside with a book, Sarah came over with a gentle smile. You're very brave, Lily, she said. I heard what happened, and I want you to know you're safe now. No one will ever hurt you again. I nodded, but deep down something in me whispered, don't trust safety too quickly. And I was right. That evening, the phone at the shelter rang. I was in the hall when Sarah answered it. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when I heard her tone change, I froze. What do you mean he's gone? She whispered into the phone. My heart skipped. Sarah listened quietly, then said, Thank you, officer, and hung up. When she turned and saw me, her face went pale. Lily, dear, maybe you should go help Mrs. Jenkins in the kitchen, she said gently. I shook my head. He escaped, didn't he? I whispered. Sarah hesitated for a long time before nodding. Yes, sweetheart. They lost him this morning. But please don't worry. The police are doing everything they can. I ran to Mrs. Jenkins, tears spilling down my cheeks. He's out again. Grandpa's out. She pulled me close, rubbing my back. It's okay, my darling. We'll be careful. We'll stay together. He can't find us here. But I wasn't so sure. That night, no one at the shelter slept well. Sarah asked everyone to stay inside and keep the doors locked. The police drove by every few hours to check on us. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was near. When I finally dozed off, I dreamt of my mother again, standing in the rain, reaching out her hand to me. "Run, Lily," she whispered in the dream. "Run and don't look back." I woke up in a cold sweat. The wind outside howled like a warning. I got up, walked quietly to the window, and peeked through the curtains. At first I saw nothing, just the dark yard and the tall fence surrounding it. But then my heart stopped. Someone was standing outside the gate. A man. Still. Silent. Watching. Even from a distance, I could tell it was him. The way he stood. The shape of his shoulders. The way the streetlight glinted off his ring. The same ring that had left a mark on my cheek the night he hit me. He was smiling. I gasped and stumbled back. "Mrs. Jenkins!" I cried. "He's here." She woke up instantly, eyes wide. "What? Who's here?" "Grandpa. He's outside." She ran to the window and looked out, but by the time she got there he was gone. Only the faint outline of footprints remained in the mud by the gate. Sarah called the police again, her hands shaking. The officers arrived quickly, searching the area with flashlights, but found nothing. One of them sighed and said, "It's possible he's watching from a distance. We'll increase patrols." Mrs. Jenkins locked the window and sat beside me on the bed, wrapping her arms around me. "He won't touch you again, Lily. I'll protect you with my life." I buried my face in her chest, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began to fall, tapping softly on the roof. But in that sound, I could almost hear his voice, low whispering, promising that this wasn't the end. I didn't know what he was planning. I only knew one thing. The next time he came for me, something terrible would happen. The rain fell harder that night, beating against the roof like angry drums. Every few seconds, lightning flashed through the window, lighting up the small room where I sat awake beside Mrs. Jenkins. She was reading her Bible, her lips moving in silent prayer. I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made my heart jump. The storm was fierce, but it wasn't the thunder that scared me. It was the feeling that he was near again. I got up quietly and walked to the window. The glass was fogged from the warmth inside, but when I wiped it with my hand, I saw something that made my breath catch. The gate was open. "Mrs. Jenkins," I whispered, "the gate's open." She stood quickly, her face pale. "Stay behind me, Lily," she said, grabbing the flashlight from the bedside table. She peeked through the curtain but saw no one. "Maybe the wind blew it," she said softly, though her voice trembled. But I knew the wind hadn't done that. The lights flickered once, then went out. The whole house fell into darkness. I clutched Mrs. Jenkins' hand tightly. We could hear the wind howling through the cracks of the windows, the sound of the gate banging lightly against the fence. Somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaked. "Stay here," Mrs. Jenkins whispered, but I shook my head. "No, please don't go." She looked at me with brave eyes and said, "I have to make sure everyone's safe." Then she stepped out into the hallway. The darkness felt alive, pressing close around me. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, listening to the sound of her footsteps fade down the stairs. Then there was silence. A minute passed. 2. Then I heard it, a sharp crash from the kitchen below. Mrs. Jenkins screamed. "Mrs. Jenkins!" I shouted, running toward the door before I could think. My bare feet slapped against the cold floor as I hurried down the steps. The flashlight beam flickered at the bottom of the stairs, lying on its side. And then I saw him. Grandpa. His face was wild, his clothes soaked from the rain. His eyes looked empty, like all the good in him had died long ago. He was shouting, "She's mine. You can't keep her from me." Mrs. Jenkins stood between him and me, holding a rolling pin like a weapon. "You'll have to go through me first," she said bravely, her hands shaking. "Then move," he roared, stepping closer. That's when I remembered something my mother always told me. Kindness doesn't mean weakness, Lily. Sometimes love has to protect itself. My eyes darted to the phone on the wall. I ran for it, grabbed it, and dialed the police. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "Please. He's here." I cried into the phone. He broke in. "Please hurry." He turned toward me, his face twisting with anger. "Put that down," he yelled, starting toward me, but before he could reach me, Mrs. Jenkins hit him hard on the arm with the rolling pin. He shouted in pain and stumbled back. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door. "Run, Lily," she cried. We ran out into the rain, barefoot and soaked, lightning flashing above us. The cold wind hit my face as we dashed down the muddy path toward the front gate. Behind us, I could hear him shouting my name, his voice breaking in the storm. We made it to the road just as police sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights cut through the rain like fire. 2 police cars screeched to a stop, and officers jumped out with flashlights and batons. "There!" Mrs. Jenkins shouted, pointing toward the house. The officers ran past us. I stood trembling, holding Mrs. Jenkins' hand. Moments later, they dragged him out, shouting at him to stop resisting. He was yelling my name, crying, "She's my blood. You can't take her from me." But no one listened. When they finally put him in the car, one of the officers came over and put a blanket around me. "It's over, sweetheart," he said gently. "You're safe now." I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. I just stood there in the rain, staring at the flashing lights, feeling everything and nothing at once. Mrs. Jenkins knelt beside me, brushing the wet hair from my face. "You did it, Lily," she said softly. "You were brave. So brave." The next few days passed in a blur. The police told us he would face trial for what he'd done, and that he wouldn't be able to hurt me again. Mrs. Jenkins decided we wouldn't go back to the old town. "Too many ghosts there," she said. "We'll start fresh somewhere new." And that's what we did. We moved to a small town by the sea, where the air smelled of salt, and the sunsets painted the water gold. Mrs. Jenkins opened a tiny bakery again, and I went to school for the first time in months. I made new friends. I smiled again. But even in the quiet of this new place, I still carried the memory of what happened. The pain, the fear, and the courage that came after it. Sometimes, I stand by the window at night and look up at the stars. I imagine my mother up there watching me. I whisper, "I made the right decision, Mom. I chose to live." Because that's what it was really, the decision. The night everything broke, I decided not to stay a victim. I decided to fight for myself, to survive, to keep going even when it hurt. And that decision saved my life. Now every morning when I wake up, I help Mrs. Jenkins in the bakery and hand out bread to smiling faces. The world feels safe again, not perfect, not easy, but safe. And whenever I see a little girl looking sad or scared, I tell her, "Don't ever let anyone take your voice away. You are stronger than you think." Because that's what I learned. And maybe, just maybe, that was what my mother wanted me to learn all along. If this story touched your heart, remember, pain doesn't define us, our courage does. Subscribe to @Grandma Hidden Tales 12 for more powerful real-life lessons that remind us, even in the darkest nights, light still finds a way to shine. Crescent moon sparkles.